Howdy YouTube. So I wanted to kind of throw a rant out there about how modern environmentalism is lame and sucks and should feel bad about itself. um, so I consider myself environmentally concerned but not an environmentalist, and there's some pretty important reasons for that. So let me first tell you a little bit about my history. I grew up in coastal California, which is extremely liberal and very environmentally conscious, let's say. And a lot of my views on the environment were shaped by the fact that I grew up in a very natural and beautiful area, and I felt like that's something to preserve because future generations should be able to experience what I had as a child, at the least. And then also being surrounded by liberals, I kind of got like a liberal mindset at the time, and I even went out and watched The Inconvenient Truth, and kind of drank the Kool-Aid on that one for a long time. And then I moved later on, after the recession, I moved over to Portland, Oregon, which is even more full of liberals, and that kind of soaked in. I got involved in Obama rallies and other like stuff that I find hilarious now, but it's just a sign of somebody who's kind of misled. After that, I realized that I have basically life-threatening allergies in Portland, Oregon, and kept getting sinus infections, and they were running out of antibiotics to give me, so I had to flee. So I figured, okay, let's move to Denver, Colorado, because it's just like an opposite environment almost, and there's a different set of plants there, and maybe it'll work. So me and my wife, that I met in Portland, by the way, it's surprising. I only lived there for a year, and she came with me. What luck. We had heard nothing but good things about Denver on the internet and through friends and stuff, and everyone was just drooling over it. So we were like, okay, let's pack up our 2 cars with every single thing we own and just head out there and get a hotel, find a place, get situated. Well, we hated the place. Absolutely hated it. And so we didn't really know what to do after that. So we looked into Colorado Springs, and it had a lot of the same negative elements that we didn't like about Denver, but less of them. And it was also a lot more beautiful. They had a really good bike path, and downtown was kind of cute and Victorian kind of era buildings and things. So we moved there just because we didn't have anything else in mind. And I came to sort of dislike Colorado Springs as well, other than the weather and scenery, and just, I don't know, there's a lot of crazy people that live out there. But while I was there, I got involved with Occupy Wall Street because I was still kind of liberal, and I got introduced to a lot of sort of Ron Paul-y, libertarianish, anarchist-ish people, and because it's a very conservative area, and it kind of flipped my whole view of the world around, because I had not really examined my opinions, sort of living in this echo chamber of liberalism and environmentalism for so long, that I just, it just kind of blew my mind that other people perceive the world so differently. So after we moved to Colorado Springs and then subsequently got out of there, we moved to Utah, making that, okay, there's less crazy people here, the streets are nice, the Mormons church likes to use this Salt Lake City area as kind of like their piece to impress the world with, and it's just, I don't know, it's a nice area. I mean, it's got its problems, but so we moved there. It's also rather conservative area, except for the inside of Salt Lake City. So the sort of mindfuck of, wow, here's another group of people that perceive the world completely differently than me, just kind of continued on. And so I continued to examine my own beliefs about, like, well, how is it that the people in Portland and the people in, sort of inner America see the world so differently? Like, there must be some truth in between the two. And that included sort of examining my views about the environment. I still considered myself an environmentalist at the time, though. So sort of looking for whatever the common denominator was that would bring people together to actually kind of give a shit about environmental issues, I realized there's actually a lot of problems with environmentalism today. and realized that I couldn't really throw myself in that camp. So the first problem I can consider is that global warming is going to lead to the oceans boiling. And that's something I generally believed at the time, but I had decided to go start looking at some global warming alarmist websites, and then also look at some denier websites to see, if there's some common denominator truth in the middle, and maybe something that would make sense to sort of bring the two sides together. And when browsing a denier website, I found like a really high quality one, and I forget what it was called, but they were talking about the Earth's natural cycles, and they presented the Vostok ice core data, and it showed that this planet had a temperature degree variance of about 12 degrees C within as short a period of 100,000 years, maybe less than that, and then even within 100 years there were variations of 4 degrees C. So here we are concerned with 1.1 degrees C or whatever it is today, and freaking out about global warming and whatnot. But actually, even within our lifetimes, a natural cycle could have occurred that made this heat, this extra heat. So it's actually very hard to get a baseline of what the Earth should be doing, and we don't completely understand even basic things like weather just yet. I mean, your average meteorologist is off by up to 20%, and he still has a job, right? So it's I just kind of thought that there's maybe the case for being afraid of global warming wasn't as strong as it was purported to be by Al Gore and other friends, and I sort of started to question that, and I don't really consider myself a denier. I understand that CO2 is essentially geoengineering the whole planet at this point, and it does have a relation to what kind of heat the planet is at, but it just doesn't seem like the nightmare scenario of the oceans boiling is realistic. It seems like we would run out of oil before we're even able to do something like that. So I became kind of a skeptic on that. And so one of the biggest problems I have with the environmentalists is that they're so concerned about CO2 that they kind of forget other things. Like, that I'm a huge fan of electric vehicles. I want nothing but an electric vehicle. I think it's a great solution. But a lot of people that consider themselves environmentalists think that switching out a gasoline-powered car for an electric car is a net benefit, like a net benefit so big that it will save our planet. I would have to really disagree with that, because if you take a car like the Model S, it's about the weight of a Hummer H3, give or take a couple 100 pounds. So it's a lot of aluminum and some steel and batteries that are very large and require a lot of mining and mineral extraction and processing and things like that. So a car like the Tesla Model S does have a sizable impact when you create it. It does have a lower impact as you continue to operate it, because if you have a solar panel on top of your house feeding this car, you're really not emitting any carbon dioxide, which is fantastic. But you can't really forget about the fact that these advanced electric vehicles need some exotic materials that are very hard to extract, and you have things like child labor in Congo supplying cobalt and other rare materials, and strip mining happening in Canada and things like that. Nickel mines are pretty bad. So the electric car doesn't have a impact, and it's pretty sizable. So you can't just say that once we get rid of the carbon, we're going to be fine. No, the truth is, like, a lot of the EV stuff that we buy here in North America is all created in a country with almost no environmental protections, China, and so essentially we're kind of offloading a bunch of waste so that we can save carbon, and it's just really kind of ridiculous. I think once you factor in for all of the negative damage done by producing high-tech electronics, you might have the same impact as a gasoline car, which is really bad. So we can't hyper-focus on CO2. You have to consider all the other issues that we have when you're coming up with solutions. Like, the environmental problems we have from chemicals and other things are just so numerous. I can't even count them all. I mean, But as an environmentalist, you kind of, if you care about the environment, you need to kind of care about all of them, which is very difficult to do. So that's my main problem with environmentalism today, is there's a huge emphasis on CO2 and forgetting other things that matter. Another big sticking point I have with a lot of environmentalists, so-called, is that they don't live by their own prescriptions, and their primary way to try to get the environment cleaned up is to ask government to make new laws, force people into paying higher fuel prices, taxing things, etc., when they themselves do not live as if those policies existed. I remember when I became a little bit skeptical of global warming, I was driving a Honda Civic with a manual transmission and was learning how to hypermile it so that I could get, well over 40 miles per gallon. And in addition to that, I was riding my bicycle everywhere that I could go. And so by my definition, having a used car that I had repaired and a bicycle, I was having a much lower impact on the climate than somebody who was driving an SUV, right? Which is a good thing to try. Well, a lot of people that I had started to try to explain my case to, that maybe global warming isn't as bad as we think it will be. They were driving much larger cars, and so I had to bring up the thing of, if you're concerned about this, why don't you have a lower impact vehicle? And there's always some kind of excuse, like, oh well, occasionally tow a boat a couple times a year, so I should drive this 5,000 pound thing to work back and forth instead of get a separate car or find something else. It's just excuses. So if you're for a carbon tax, then see if it's even possible in your own life to live as if gasoline was $8 a gallon. And if you can't do that, then how's it going to work for everyone else, right? It's the same thing for a lot of other areas that aren't transportation related, like the people that were really for like a plastic straw bag ban probably use plastic bags themselves and kind of just go, well, wait for government to force everyone to do it. So that's another issue I have with environmentalism today, is that it's not sort of like a voluntary affair where you go and do the right thing and then you influence other people to do it, and hopefully it spreads. It's more like we're going to try to get the government to fix this, which is just in my opinion completely irresponsible as a means. It's look at the track record of our own government. It's a complete mess. And now there's it's currently operated by conservatives who really couldn't care less. So I mean, you could do all this work to get the environment cleaner, but you get the wrong person in there and they can just wipe the whole thing out. So the track record for that method of cleaning up the planet is pretty poor. Yeah, so what else? Oh, another issue with the environmentalists is that they often find themselves focusing on the companies that produce products that pollute. So, you want to get the Koch brothers to stop drilling oil in your backyard. Obviously, only an evil company would drill oil and sell it and pollute the planet. Well, you're kind of forgetting the fact that the reason that these companies are in business is that they have tons of customers, and you probably drive a gasoline car, and you probably heat your house in the winter and then cool it in the summer, right? So you're actually a consumer of these products. So I think that blaming the companies for producing products that you demand and will pay good money for, it's not really exactly kind of the way. It's sort of like blaming a drug dealer for your drug addiction. You can always figure out some other way to live your life. I mean, there's so many options now with alternative energy that it's just like, it's kind of ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, really the real environmental problem is actually us. It's your neighbor, it's me, it's you, it's everyone that lives in a Western civilization, or even maybe Asian civilization is responsible. I mean, we are all kept in planet's arch nemesis is henchmen, really. I mean, we're handing our money over to big fossil fuel and whatnot, and it's, even when we have alternatives and making excuses for it. So, if the environmentalist people can't be shining examples of what it is to live a clean life, then, what's the whole point? You're just essentially virtue signaling, at that point, which is a waste of your time. And the same thing goes with a lot of the protests. They're usually a waste of time. So I think the only way to sort of get people to give a shit about the environment is to be a living example and sort of like virally spread these ideas and come up with alternative things that actually work, and don't hyper focus on carbon emissions numbers. Think also about what the real impact of producing this new good is. But the easiest way actually to help save the environment is to conserve energy. Even if you're driving a gasoline car, you can learn about things like hypermiling and aerodynamics and greatly improve your fuel economy. For example, I unfortunately was in a situation where I had to buy a new car, and I had very limited time, and I bought a new subcompact manual transmission Econobox, basically, and it was rated for 40 miles per gallon highway, and I just thought, this is a freaking joke. I can do way better than this. So given that I've been hypermiling for many years, I decided to, also take on the task of learning how to drive this car in the most optimal way possible. And I've seen, anywhere from 50 to 60 miles per gallon driving on the highway at about 5 to 10 under the speed limit in the right lane. And it's like, hey, I've cut the impact of this car significantly on the planet, and also saved money, which was like a double win for me. Sorry if you're behind me, but it is the right lane. So, basic things like that. I mean, the car was less environmentally intensive to produce than, say, a full electric car. So I don't feel too bad about it. I would like better, but, it's a very inexpensive vehicle and an inexpensive method to reduce your total footprint on the earth. And obviously, like, a bicycle is great too. It uses so little energy compared to a car, it's not even funny. So that's another option for very cheaply reducing your footprint. And then another one is to have like a small backyard garden where you can farm things organically or however you want to do it, and it doesn't have to be shipped from thousands of miles away and then refrigerated and then shipped again and then washed and then stick it in a refrigerated case at a supermarket. So it's like you skip all these steps that involve carbon dioxide pollution and gasoline pollution when you just simply have your backyard be part of your supermarket. So that's a very easy and effective way to reduce your footprint. Another one is to recycle things as much as you can, and then also, if something is broken, fix it. Because let's say you've got a $300 cell phone, and it's inside of it, it's got a lithium battery, it's got gold in the contactors, it's got some rare metals in the processor and things like that. So if you just go like throw that thing in the trash, that's going to sit in a landfill and eventually leach out its chemicals into the groundwater, and some schmuck's going to have to drink that groundwater with heavy metals in it, and that's not good. So really, like, financially, it's better to fix something, and it's also better for the environment. So throw a $50 screen at the thing and keep using it unless it's way past its usable life, like you can't use modern applications or something like that. And same thing with the computers. I see computers thrown away all the time as a computer technician that could have been upgraded and kept for another couple of years with minimal resources, but people just don't even bother. Another thing is to buy used things. Go to any thrift store, bring a power cord, any kind of like testing stuff you have for, especially when it comes to electronics, and try something out while you're there. My entire studio is actually consisted of thrift store parts that I've every other weekend I will go to thrift stores and just kind of browse, and if I see something really nice, I'll pick it up. And eventually I've assembled a entire studio with you'll see here. This is my studio. There's a $10 keyboard, perfectly good. There's a $10 MIDI connector. I don't think you can see it. Sorry about that. These speakers were $20 a pair. These are actually low-end studio monitors, which I'm totally fine with. That keyboard, yeah, that amp, this monitor. This is all from the thrift store. I didn't have to go and have these things produced again in duplicate. So kind of helps save the environment, really, to just save something from a landfill that's still useful. So those are just some basic things you can do to pretty much reduce your impact. The other thing that's a little bit more high-hanging fruit is to replace all your appliances with higher efficiency ones. Like I've done a couple videos about swamp coolers and the economics and efficiency of them. In some areas they work really great, in other areas they don't. But if you live in an area where they do work great, you should absolutely use one in combination with an air conditioning unit, depending on your natural humidity. You'll greatly reduce your pollution from a power plant nearby. There's just all kinds of things you can do. The list goes on. Like, there's people that have compiled lists that are like miles long of things you can voluntarily do to reduce your impact. And so if you're going to call yourself an environmentalist, you should probably live by your own prescription, at least, instead of try to get the government to force everyone into your way of living, which is kind of a jerk thing to do. I mean, I know your heart's in the right place, but it's really, you don't want to force people to do things at gunpoint. Ideally, you want to convince them that it's a good idea. And a lot of the environment saving ideas that I presented actually save you money. So there's two different benefits to it. So yeah, hopefully this makes sense to anyone that considers themselves an environmentalist, and maybe you'll get something out of it. But I just wanted to kind of put this rant out there because it's been something I've been thinking about for a real long time. All right, peace.